Hello, everyone, and thank you very much for joining me this beautiful Tuesday, the third Tuesday of March 2025. Tuesday, March 18, 2025. Have you been? How's your week been? It's a joy, it's a pleasure, it's a delight, it's a privilege to welcome you on the 11th edition, wow, Developing National Innovation Systems for Absorptive Capacity on Aggregate Radio Communications. My name is Tolu Omoda. Today we are going to go deeper into what we started last week, but I'm going to do a quick recap of what we discussed last week as always, and then we go further into it. So last week we had examined one of the top performers in the Eurozone, and this is a nation that had moved from the fifth position in terms of innovation, right? It had moved from the fifth position according to the Global Innovation Index ranking between 2013 and 2018 to the third position from 2018 to present, and that is Denmark, right? So Denmark was one of the top performers in the Eurozone, but it further improved between 2013 and 2018 compared to 2013 and the present, right? So last week we also looked at what Denmark is doing well, right? And we saw that according to the European Innovation Scoreboard, Denmark is doing certain things very impressively, right? They said Denmark is doing well. They have a knowledge-based innovation, right? And we emphasize that without a knowledge foundation, there will be no national innovation. I repeat, without a knowledge foundation, there will be no national innovation, right? So that's one of the things that we saw that Denmark is doing well, that they have a knowledge-based innovation. We also saw that they are intentional about meeting their R&D intensity spending, right? The Eurozone agreed that nations were supposed to spend about 3% of their GDP on research and development by 2020, but Denmark actually met this target by 2019. So they're very intentional about measuring their research and development intensity and matching the commitment and meeting the commitment. We also saw that Denmark has focused a lot on making innovation a culture. For me, this was the strongest takeaways of last week. They had focused a lot on making innovation a culture. According to the observation of public sector innovation, they have this observatory of public sector innovation is like a sub-institution of the OECD, right? The OECD, like we said last week, it's like a supranational body, and it means the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. So the OECD has a sub-institution or a department called the Observatory for Public Sector Innovation, right? And this Observatory of Public Sector Innovation, OPSI, actually mentioned a number of commendable things about Denmark, which we referenced last week. I'll just go over a couple of the key strengths of Denmark. Denmark has decades of experience in innovation and digitalization, earning Denmark global recognition, right? In other words, they have been consistent with innovation, even according to this Observatory for Public Sector Innovation. The OPSI, in collaboration with the Danish Center, the Danish National Center for Public Sector Innovation, did a scan of the public sector innovation in Denmark, right, over decades, not just over a year, over some years, but over decades. And they found that Denmark supports public sector innovation to the point of global recognition, right? So Denmark has this decades of experience in innovation and digitalization, which actually earned Denmark global recognition. Another thing that we saw was that Denmark, values co-creation, which is very, very important. They co-create with stakeholders across all levels of government, not just one level of government, but across several levels of government, right? And all of these has produced a highly sophisticated welfare system in Denmark, giving them a leadership position, made them leaders in digital government, and of course also translated into a digital economy, right? And like we emphasized towards the end of last week's program, until innovation becomes a culture in your nation, your national innovation system may be dead on arrival. I repeat, until innovation becomes a culture in your nation, your national innovation strategy may be dead on arrival. So Denmark has been able to ensure that innovation becomes a way of life. Now, as we're wrapping up last week, we kind of highlighted some of the things we'll be talking about this week, because much as Denmark has done these well, question now becomes, what kind of innovation has Denmark been pursuing, and where are the opportunities? What are the areas of improvement, right? What kind of innovation should Denmark be doing more of, right? And we hinted at some of these last week, and we will go a little bit deeper into them this week, right? So last week we were hinting at something. Even according to the OPSI, the same Observatory for Public Sector Innovation, there is a certain kind of innovation that Denmark has done more of, which is the bottom-up innovation or the adaptive innovation, right? The bottom-up innovation tries to take what is already existing and improves upon it, versus the anticipatory innovation, which looks at what does not exist at all and begins to create, right? Now, of course, it is more radical. That's anticipatory innovation. It is much more uncertain, right? You're going into uncharted waters, very untemplated waters, if I can use that expression. There are no templates you have to create, but again, you are likely to get significantly more gains if you play in that territory versus if you play in the adaptive innovation territory, right? So one of the things Denmark has to do to improve, one of the opportunities for Denmark is to ensure that they begin to go towards more anticipatory innovation approaches, right? And these anticipatory innovation approaches are part of what has gotten the United States a leadership position, has caused the United States to lead in terms of innovation, right? Last week we hinted at the fact that we're going to compare the United States and Europe, right, and see where the gaps and the differences are. So generally, both the United States and the Europe are major players in innovation, but the question is, what kind of innovation has Europe generally been doing, and what kind has the United States been doing? The United States is set to lead in areas like venture capital, tech giants. That's why you have Silicon Valley here, and you have the bigger technology players in innovation. But part of this is because the United States is much more risk friendly, if I can use that word, right? So the United States takes on the more daring kinds of innovation where they create, right? And not just where they adapt existing innovation, but where they create altogether new innovations. And that is one thing that Denmark has to do better. The United States has a robust venture capital ecosystem that supports innovation and the growth of tech companies, and this has enabled the emergence of of tech giants like Google, like Amazon, Microsoft, Apple, and so on, right? Now, the United States is also said to be better at commercializing research, which has been the whole thrust of this program, the absorptive capacity, right? You know, just the innovation, like we've been saying, is a whole cycle that must go from conceptualization to commercialization. So the United States is said to be better at translating the research output into marketable products and services, right? And that helps them to attain a significantly higher level of innovation output. Now, again, if you ask me, this is still tied to the risk culture that the United States has, and it has it better than Europe. And I'll explain what I mean by that. Because if you create, even if Denmark does more of, for instance, top-down innovation, anticipatory innovation, and you don't have the funds to back up the creative outputs, right? You don't have the funds to, to try to scale what you have experimented upon, what you have piloted. How then can you lead it? How then can you grow it to the point of optimality? And that's where the fact that the US has a venture capital and startup ecosystem that supports innovation begins to, it should be a pointer to what nations like Denmark currently need to do better, right? Again, I wouldn't say how much the Danish economy, the Danish leadership, the Danish policymakers and implementers have invested into innovation. Like we said, we took into the fact that they had implemented, or they had invested, they agreed 3% of their GDP innovation by 2019 instead of the set target of 2020. That is remarkable. But then again, what is the general culture, especially innovation, like we said, is a system that has to do with both the private sector and the public sector, the industry and the academia, and all of this elements of the system must, cooperate effectively, optimally. So this may be beyond public sector innovation. The government may need to stimulate a risk culture with private sector supporters of innovation, private sector investors in innovation. Otherwise, they may not be able to, take optimal advantage of the opportunities. Because even when you talk about the top-down innovation, the anticipatory innovation, the more radical innovation, it needs to have a strong financial backing. Because if you have a lower risk culture in your nation, well, the investors may be more likely to back the adaptive innovations, the ones that are taking what is and expanding upon it, versus the anticipatory innovations, which are going to create the anticipatory innovation approaches, which are going to create what does not exist at all. However, the opportunities in terms of first mover advantage, the results, the outcomes, the gains are likely to be more for those who can take those anticipatory approaches to innovation and do a more top-down innovation than the bottom-up innovation, which Denmark seems to have mastered, and they now need as a nation to move into the more radical approaches to innovation, right? So that much as we appreciated what Denmark did last week in terms of innovation culture, like we hinted at last week, the question to ask is what kind of innovation has their culture been more supportive of, right? The United States is set to foster the kind of innovation that is more risk-friendly, more entrepreneurial, and places a critical emphasis on technological advancement. And because of that, the United States leads in key sectors like artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and genomics, right? And Europe is set to lead, including Denmark, of course, in scientific research outputs, right? Which is beautiful. Europe has a history of having a strong foundation in scientific research. We discussed that in some of our earlier outputs. They produce a large number of scientific publications, which is beautiful. That is the academia part. What about the industry part, right? How they translate it. In terms of that, Europe seems to have focused on specific technologies, and they seem to do well in automotive technology and renewable energy. I know Denmark has been a pioneer in renewable energy, right? And that's also good. But beyond that, they need to begin to do more, right? Because they are said to be stuck in what is called the middle technology trap. The middle technology trap focuses on incremental improvements in existing industries rather than, new and groundbreaking creativity. That is where Europe generally and Denmark specifically needs to grow in. My name is Teotolo Modara, and this is Amagi Communications. We're looking at developing national innovation systems for absorptive capacity, and we're also making a comparison between the Eurozone and the United States. Last week we had looked at Denmark as a nation, we had looked at what they were doing well, and this week we said we're going to come to what they can do better. Now, we've talked about the private sector in the Eurozone, in Denmark specifically, and the Eurozone generally, needing to probably take a more risk-friendly approach to supporting top-down innovation, because it may not necessarily be down to those who are creating in Denmark, but more to the support they are getting from private sector investors, as well as regulation. I'm also going to come there. Even recently with artificial intelligence and other, so to say, species of it, generative AI and so on that have been evolving, it's been said that they are facing more regulatory barriers in Europe. Now, regulation is not necessarily bad, especially when we are talking about things that have to do with people's rights and people's privacy and so on and so forth, right? But much as Europe's regulations can be comprehensive, they must also not be limiting, right? Because these regulations, for instance, have been perceived as some kind of hindrance to innovation, especially in the tech sector, in technology sector in Europe. Now, it's about finding the balance. And I think this is going to lead to where we're going to cap it today. We're going to talk about ambidexterity, which is our own preferred model of innovation in Amagi. We believe a lot in being ambidextrous. Ambidexterity means the ability to use your typical hand and your other hand. In other words, there is a place for exploiting what is, but there's also a place for exploring what is yet to be. I repeat, there is a place for exploiting what is, but there is also a place for exploring what is yet to be. And this is where we think that nations like Denmark and the rest of Europe, the leaders of innovation in Europe specifically, and the rest of Europe generally, need to play more in. I think they need to become a whole lot more ambidextrous. It's time for them to be setting specific policy goals for the bottom-up innovation, which is more adaptive innovation, that is taking what they are here to do, and as well as setting goals for the top-down innovation, which is where they need to compete, which is where they need to be. And Denmark already has a strength of taking a co-creation approach and involving critical stakeholders. So in leading this policy change, this deliberate policy direction at ambidextrous innovation, Denmark is also going to need to ensure that they adopt that multi-stakeholder engagement approach and ensure that the private sector is carried along, the investors have a say, they have a sense of ownership, they review the foundational cultural blocks to the more exploratory kinds of innovation with them, let them have their say, let them have their input, also speak to the academia. Is it that the curriculum aspect of it is encouraging more bottom-up innovation than top-down innovation? They also have to engage the innovation community in Denmark itself as well as the rest of Europe. Like, are there certain factors that enable more exploratory innovation that are currently not in place, in addition to finance and in addition to reviewing regulations? They also have to, of course, engage the regulatory community, the legal environment as well, and say, okay, if we need to carry out a review of our current innovation regulations, let's see how we can still strike the balance between comprehensiveness and enablement. I repeat, they may need to carry out that overhaul. I don't want to use the word overhaul, but at the minimum a review of their regulations, their innovation regulations, and ensure that, again, in the spirit of ambidexterity, while maintaining comprehensiveness, they are not becoming excessively restrictive. It is very, very important. I've read about this severally. Sometimes even the American companies playing in Europe have complain about the regulatory environment being too restrictive. These are things that they need to do. These are things they need to review, right? I'm not saying they need to accept every change recommendation, but they certainly need to review it. And it all begins with having a very specific policy goal of playing in the more exploratory dimensions of innovation rather than the exploitation aspect of innovation, while still maintaining that, right? But they need to set clear policy goals. This percentage of our innovation must now be exploratory. Of course, it begins with monitoring, first of all, or measuring at the minimum how much of our innovative efforts are currently exploratory and how much of our innovative efforts are currently just exploitative. In other words, how much of our innovative efforts are largely adaptive versus how much of our innovative efforts are much more creative, right? Are much more radical, are much more anticipatory. These are the things they need to start with. When they measure, they can then begin to examine what are the factors responsible for this ratio, right? The bottom-up innovation versus the top-down innovation. Why is it that we have, for instance, more bottom-up innovation than top-down innovation? What are the factors? And then when they do this kind of analysis and they see what the data is saying, then they need to begin to target policies. Multi-stakeholder policies need to be created, right? Multi-stakeholder there being that this is not just about public sector innovation, which Denmark seems to be strong in already, but it's also about ensuring that this public sector now begins to stimulate both the private sector, the academia, all players, like the National Innovation System already suggests. Is a system, right, of multiple stakeholders. We've been saying this of the earliest episodes of this program. So all stakeholders now need to be, brought into that multi-level conversations, multi-layer conversations, and have very robust sessions to say what are the things we need to do to deliberately target the more anticipatory innovation approaches. Extremely important, right? Let me also say very quickly again, while we're looking at what Denmark can do better, again, let's say one of the things that Denmark has actually done well is that there is a global competitiveness report. I think this, according to the latest global competitiveness report, Singapore is the most competitive economy out of 67 regions across the world's 8 major regions. This is a major finding of the 2024 IMD World Competitiveness ranking, right? IMD is an institution that is based in Switzerland. It's is IMD business school. It's a well-known institution, and they carry out this in world rankings of competitiveness, from time to time. Now, so after Singapore, which sort of regained its place in terms of creating best long-term value according to this IMD report, Singapore regained its place because they had dropped a couple of years ago, but to a few positions behind, but they are back according to this World Competitiveness Ranking of the IMD Business School. But after after Singapore, Switzerland was said to be second and Denmark was third. So again, this shows you that Denmark is doing something well. Even with their largely exploitative approach to innovation, they are still doing something well. However, they can do something better. Nothing is stopping them from rising to the second position or even the first position in terms of innovation, in terms of competitiveness. Now, for those in Nigeria, according to this IMD 2024 World Competitiveness Ranking, Nigeria was said to have made its debut, and that's remarkable too, right? As well as Ghana and Puerto Rico, by the way. Even though we looked at the Nigerian innovation framework, and we said one of the things that was lacking is there seems to be no monitoring and evaluation template within that national innovation strategy. At least it is good to see that Nigeria made its debut according to this 2024 World Competitiveness Ranking of IMD. Nigeria made its debut in this 2024 ranking, this 2024 World Competitiveness Ranking, right? And again, it's good to see Singapore rising, because the last time we occupied that first place was in 2020, and then it fell to the 5th position and the 3rd position, and finally the 4th position in the subsequent years, as it fell from 1st position to 5th position in 2021, probably a factor of COVID, but they were able to catch their breath as a nation and return to the 3rd position in 2022. Then they slid again to the 4th position in 2023, but they are finally back to the 1st position according to this World Competitiveness Ranking in 2024, right? But the nation I'm really interested in following from last week is Denmark, right? So Denmark actually has a 3rd position in this World Competitiveness Ranking. So much as there are certain things they need to do better, obviously even their adaptive approach to innovation is working, and that's why we are not saying throw away what is working. We are saying just take an ambidextrous approach, right? Use your typical, and obviously Denmark has done something well with exploitative innovation. Maintain your strength, maintain the area of your competitive advantage, continue to consolidate on your strength while venturing into what you're not currently good in, or what you're not currently the best in, which is your other hand, right? And as the ambidextrous approach, we always advocate for strongly in our gates. When we develop strategy frameworks for you, when we develop performance management frameworks for you, we always insist on an ambidextrous approach, right? There must be something you're doing well. Whatever has gotten you thus far, you don't throw it away, you continue to consolidate upon it in an area of competitive advantage for you. And while doing that, because the world is constantly changing, you also need to begin to develop your other hand, not your typical hand, but your other hand. If you're left-handed, just imagine breaking that hand. I remember as a child, I once got my typical hand fractured, I think, and I had to lean on my other hand. So there may be those times where the world, the environment, competitiveness, policies, responses for other nations, international pressures, wars, all kinds of things can affect your typical innovation framework, right? And that is why you cannot lean only on your typical hand. Denmark cannot afford to rest only on the exploitative model that has brought it thus far. While maintaining and consolidating that approach, Denmark must also continue to develop its other hand, right? Denmark must become intentional about exploring anticipatory approaches to innovation, and that is where ambidextrous culture must be deliberately stimulated in Denmark, right? They must begin to venture into the more adventurous, if I can use that expression, right? The more anticipatory approaches to innovation, the things they have not done before, the things they have not explored before, the more exploratory approaches to innovation. In Namogate, we like to use the terms exploitation and exploration, right? They need to become more exploratory, deliberately, intentionally setting clear policy goals and reviewing what needs to be done for those policy goals to be achieved, setting clear targets, right? Not just for innovation generally, but for the aspect of their innovation that must be adaptive, that will continue to be adaptive as has been working for them, and the ones that must become now more anticipatory going forward, more exploratory and not just exploitative going forward. These are very intentional approaches that Denmark needs to take to advance its position, to consolidate on its strength, definitely, but while also venturing into areas of possibilities, areas of opportunities, right? Because growth only happens outside the comfort zone. I repeat, growth only happens outside the comfort zone, and that is the whole point of innovation. Innovation is doing what you've not done before, is stepping out of what you have become familiar with, right? While consolidating upon that, you must then begin to advance deliberately into the things that you are yet to do before. Wow, this has been a very interesting session. Looking at reviewing what we looked at last week, what Denmark is doing well, but also beginning to ask questions as to what Denmark can do better to improve in terms of their innovativeness, in terms of their global competitiveness, because there are opportunities. There are always opportunities. The greatest room for improvement, a friend used to say, is the greatest room in the world, is the room for improvement, right? So these are the things that we think that Denmark needs to do. Very intentional, ambidextrous approach to innovation, very clear policy goals to ensure that a certain percentage of the innovation outputs are more exploratory than exploitative, a review of their private sector, especially the investment climate, right? What is the investors' climate and investors' culture like towards more exploratory innovations, right? Are they as supportive as you find in the United States of completely radical approaches to innovation, right? These are the things they need to look at. The venture capital and startup ecosystem in Denmark, what is it like, and what is the path to commercialization, right? The path to commercialization of research, what is it like? But I think one very strong thing that Denmark needs to look at is that venture capital and startup ecosystem, which is an advantage that the United States clearly has. How well are their own venture capital and startup ecosystem players supportive of anticipatory innovation and radical innovation as compared to what you have in the United States, right? So it's not enough to say we have an innovation culture. We also need to say what kind of innovation is our culture more supportive of. Is it time to have a more exploratory innovation culture than just an exploitative innovation culture? And again, we need to look at the regulations, like we said, while maintaining its comprehensiveness. Can they ensure that it has not become restrictive? Very important. Of course, they also have to work with the academia. With this, they have to look at the curriculum and look at what is supporting, what is emphasizing, and what is pointing innovators towards really, really important. Wow. I hope you have enjoyed doing this with me. I've thoroughly enjoyed looking at these factors, looking at these issues, looking at, examining the undergirding elements that may be supporting or hindering certain kinds of innovations in even nations that are already leading. I look forward to coming back for what is likely to be the very last edition of this program, quarter 1 2025. We'll be wrapping up next week. Next week will be the last Tuesday of March, and it will also be the last Tuesday of quarter 1 2025. Wow, just like that. So we're coming back next week for the very last edition. We'll wrap up all of this. Until then, please know that we have fantastic programs that run Monday through Friday. My colleagues will be back tomorrow on their own programs on Thursday, on Friday, and we'll continue to look at several dimensions of national, institutional, organizational issues that can help to, shape you up from a strategy point of view, strengthen you from a monitoring and evaluation point of view, position you to respond to geopolitical issues appropriately, not just to react, but to anticipate and respond appropriately in such a way that you continue to have the lead in your industries, in your sectors, in your nations, in your continent, your areas of your regions, your areas of competitive strength, as well as future possibilities. Again, remember, it is important to have an ambidextrous approach to innovation. That has been the thrust of today's episode, using Denmark as a continuing case study. You must learn to use your typical as well as your other hand. You must learn to exploit your current advantages while positioning yourself for future possibilities. You must learn to do both exploitative or bottom-up adaptive innovation, as well as exploratory or top-down anticipatory innovation. You need both. Very, very important. Well, so I come your way same time, same station next week. Remember, we're here to support your strategy needs. We're here to support your policy needs. We're here to help you to translate strategy to performance management to ensure execution excellence. We're here to help you move from policy formulation to policy implementation through robust monitoring and evaluation. And this is what we do. This is what we are very good at. You can follow us on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on Instagram. You can also check out our website, www.theamoge.org. Please reach us. We want to support you. We want to help you. We want to transfer skills to your people in the course of doing this, because this is what we're very good at. This is what we're passionate about. This is not just what we do. This is who we are. Until I come your way same time, same station next week for the final edition of this program, remember, think ambidextrous approaches to innovation. Think ambidexterity. Think exploitative innovation, but also think exploratory innovation. Take care of yourselves and see you same time, same station next week for the final edition of the program. Goodbye.